These notes will be about shapes of states, types of states, a little bit about federated and unitary governments, and the EU as a supranational organization, and the centripetal and centrifugal forces that are working to keep it together and tear it apart. So first, geographers are concerned with the different shapes of states, how big they are, how small they are, and how that can contribute to the advantages and disadvantages of each. First item here we're looking at is does size matter? Well, in the case of countries, yeah, a large country can give you more resources possibly, but it doesn't necessarily lead to more power. You just have to basically look at the fact that the United States is about half the size of the USSR, or the former USSR, Russia, and yet in 2002 we were about 4 times as wealthy per person as Russia. Also, places like Japan are pretty small, and yet they're pretty high up there in economic and political power in the world. Same with some of the European countries like the UK and France and Germany. All right, different types of shapes of countries. We have elongated, compact, prorrupt, fragmented, and perforated. So the first one is a compact state, which is basically a state like this circle or a square or this kind of shape here, where basically the borders are going to be equidistant from the center. You typically see this in smaller states. They tend to be pretty stable. You can communicate very well throughout. If you have a unitary government or central government, a national government that controls the whole country and it's centrally located, then it can communicate very well with the entire country. I'm sorry. Examples: Poland, Iceland, the DRC, Zimbabwe. Another type of state is a fragmented state, and as you can see by the little illustration here, it consists of 2 or more pieces. Technically, any country that has an island off its coast, like the United States and Hawaii, or even the small islands that are off its coast, is a fragmented state, though much better examples are places like the Philippines or Indonesia, Micronesia, countries that are made up of thousands and thousands of islands. You can imagine it can be very difficult to communicate with these islands, especially before the technology that we have now with wireless communication and stuff. Before that, it would have been even more difficult. But even now, trying to get supplies to these areas gets very expensive. You live in Hawaii, you're going to pay double for milk, double for gas, things like that, just because it's hard to transport things there. And it's the same case in places where you have a lot of little islands. So fragmented states. The next one is an elongated state. Here's Norway. Probably the best example is Chile, which at times is only about 30 miles across and just hundreds and thousands of miles long. And this can create problems just where people feel like, for in the case of Norway, Oslo, the capital, is way down here, and people up here may feel like they don't really understand. The people that are down here don't really understand how they live up here, and it can create problems with possible the amount of land you have for arable land for farming and stuff like that, depending on how narrow it is and what kind of land you have. Prorrupt states are states that have kind of a compact state at one point, and then some long piece of land that just kind of extends from it. Oklahoma, which is an American state, has the Panhandle. So does Florida. So those are prorrupted. Okay, and the best example in the world is Thailand. If I get rid of, let me see if I can get rid of these clear annotations. You can kind of just see the shape of that and how weird it is. And that piece that sticks out. We have kind of an interesting situation here in this is the area around the Caspian Sea. The Black Sea would be on this side. The Russia's up here. You can see Iran's down here. We've learned a little about Dagestan and Chechnya, which are over here. So we have a country named Azerbaijan and one named Armenia. We got a lot of kind of funky stuff going on here. Here in Armenia, we have mostly, this could be kind of an elongated state, or even, I can't quite tell with the area I drew in there with that, it's kind of got corrupted in that sense, but it's also fragmented because it's got a chunk over here sitting inside of Azerbaijan, right? So Armenia is a fragmented state for sure. Okay, it's also called an exclave when you have an area of a country that is separated and surrounded by another country. From the Azerbaijan perspective, we have what's called a perforated state, which means a state that's basically has a hole punched out of it, in this case by this part of Armenia. Okay, from the sense of Azerbaijan, this would be an enclave, an ethnic enclave, or an ethnic group that is different from the rest of the country and is completely surrounded by the country. So weird things, dynamics. From Armenia, it's a fragmented state with an exclave here. From the Azerbaijan perspective, it's a perforated state with an enclave inside of it. Same thing with South Africa, my apologies, with the country of Lesotho sitting inside of South Africa. This would be an ethnic enclave, and it would make it a perforated state. A couple of states in America. Alaska is an exclave because it's separated from America. It also makes America a fragmented state because, again, it's separated from it. And the shape of Alaska itself is a prorupted state in that it has these sort of extensions out here. This is obviously California, an elongated state because of its length. And you see here in Southern Africa, you have every kind of shaped states. You have elongated states like Malawi and Mozambique. You have a prorupted state here in the DRC, and right here in Namibia, you see this chunk that sticks out over here. That would make it a prorupted state. You got compact states like Zimbabwe. You have a perforated state in South Africa, an enclave right here in Lesotho. You have islands off the coast of Africa in these areas here, so that would make all of these basically fragmented states. All right. So moving on, you should be taking notes. Go ahead and draw a line. We're going to talk briefly about two types of governments that you find in the world. One's unitary and one's federated. A unitary government is a government that is strong central government, which means that the national government, the government of the country, is very, very strong. And your smaller subsections, whether you call them provinces or states or districts or whatever, they have very, very little power. Basically, the power is concentrated in the government of the country. And so there's strong nationalism. You do have to have effective communication, because if it's all coming from one place, then you better communicate that effectively. It's preferred by small states because large states would be too hard to control from one central location. And it can be used for citizens to assimilate and comply. Strong governments that control their people, like Saddam in Iraq and Tito in Yugoslavia, basically had a stranglehold on their people. And anybody who rises up and tries to cause problems can get smashed very quickly, sent to jail, or killed by the government. So some of these unitary governments rule with fear and with kind of heavy-handed tactics, whereas other ones like France don't. And so you have both, but a lot of the time they tend to be the more kind of heavy-handed type of governments. The more preferred form of government is a federated. It implies a federation or a collection of sort of political entities that have come together and kind of share power. And that's why it's not United America, or it's not just America of this country, but it's the United States. And it implies that, again, these states have come together and are sharing power. And that's exactly the case. The United States government has a lot of rights, and in the Bill of Rights, individuals have freedom of speech, and we have search and seizure protection, and we have right to bear arms. And then, and later on in the Bill of Rights, it says that whatever, rights aren't granted in the Constitution, including, things, talks about the presidency and the legislature and the judicial branch and all that, but then it says whatever hasn't been listed here belongs to the states, and the states get to decide. An example of this would be CSAP, the test that you love to take, and that's an idea that came from the United States government. But the United States government can't force American states to do that because, partially it's an education decision, and education is traditionally something that states get to do on their own. So instead it suggests that they do these tests, and if they don't do the test, then they don't get the money that comes attached to them, which amounts to hundreds of millions of dollars. Or they may decide, the government may decide that if you don't do these tests, they may take away some of your other money, possibly for roads or grants for doing dams or fixing buildings or whatever it might be. So a lot of states comply and they'll just do it. But some states say, forget it, we're not going to do it. And, they just don't get the money. But in that whole example and discussion, you get the idea that you have a national government that's sharing power with local, or just kind of, as it says right here, basically local governments, whether it be at a larger scale, like, traditional American states, or cities, or whatever it may be. It is preferred by larger states, just because it's too hard to control a massive country with just one capital national government. And it's preferred by multinational states because it allows people the chance to kind of voice their opinions and make their own decisions, especially when you have different ethnic groups, large ethnic groups within a country. It can be more unstable because by giving people more local power, sometimes they take too much power. For example, with marijuana in Colorado, it's illegal in the country, but Colorado saying, hey, we're going to make marijuana legal. And so, in some cases, local governments take too much power, and then they may even decide they want to secede or leave the country. So that can be a problem. It is the world trend. So if you're starting a new government, more than likely it's a federated government. All right, for this one, I want you to pause and again draw a line. It's the European Union, and I want you to write centripetal and centrifugal forces. Any kind of international organization between lots of countries is a supranational organization, and there are many in the world. There's the EU, there's OPEC. It's talking here about the oil supranational organization. You have CETO. You have NAFTA, which is a trade agreement between the United States and Canada and Mexico. You have NATO. You have lots of different international organizations. One of the most well-known is the EU. So we're looking at what brings them together and tears them apart. So, when you have these collections of flags, people think, oh, look, they're all arranged together. These people are working together. That's centripetal. It brings them together. But there's also centrifugal here. A lot of different groups are represented, and at any moment, some of them may start feeling like they're better than other people or stronger or whatever. So that can lead to centrifugal forces. When you look at a flag like this and you say, oh, you fly this flag and we fly this flag, Germany does and France does, you have the same flag I do, and it makes us feel like we're more together. So that would be a centripetal force. So having your own individual flag can be a centrifugal force. Having a common flag can be a centripetal force. Along the same lines, you can see that most of Western Europe belongs to the EU. That's a centrifugal force. But there are countries like Switzerland, Norway, and a lot of Eastern Europe that aren't part of it. Some because they don't want to, for example, Switzerland and Norway. Some because they just can't, because their economies aren't good, or there's a history there or something, so they don't allow them in, and that creates a centrifugal force. The euro is a common currency that's used by all of Europe. When I went to Europe about 15 years ago, I started out in Germany and had to change my money to Deutschmarks. Then went to Switzerland and I needed Swiss francs. Then went to Italy and needed lira. So as of 15 years ago, Europe had as many different currencies as they had countries. But now those who can use the euro do and have, except for places like UK, which has kept their pound. But using that same currency and going from France to Germany and using the same money, that creates a sense of togetherness, and it's centripetal. Not to mention borders. To go to this one right here, this card allows you to go to anywhere in the EU, and if you live in the EU, then you get this card. So whether you're from Poland or from France, you have the same card, and that brings a sense of togetherness, right? Hey, you're Polish. Hey, I'm French. Wow, we got the same card. We feel alike. And so that's centripetal. Okay, going back to the flag, in this case, Russia is shutting down gas to the EU, and the EU doesn't know how to respond. So the way different countries can respond to an issue can be a centrifugal force. Lastly, the way that political power is spread out in Russia, with Germany having like 99 representatives in the EU, and places like Malta having 5, would be a centrifugal force, okay, as they're feeling pretty left out and they're feeling like they got a lot of power. So you can see how the euro, how basically the EU in general has had both centripetal and centrifugal